Of Blood and Steel, written by Seymour Zainali, narrated by James Lawrence. Chapter 18. Ice and Fire. The smell of fire lingered in the air when morning broke. It was thick and pungent. A light breeze blew a dusting of ash overhead. It was a gray day. The smell and the ash weren't coming from the fire that Balak and Arda had built. They had hidden in a small forest overnight. Arda had brought milk and bread in her satchel, and Balak had found an egg that looked like it had been pushed from its nest. He had kept their fire going all through the night, and had made a kind of shelter to protect them from the chill cutting the air. Since he left the hollow it had never been this cold, and although the sun was quite high, the sky was hidden by gray and white clouds. Arda cooked breakfast in silence. Balak knew she hadn't slept well.
"Eat," he said. "Your food is getting cold."
"It's cold already." She poked at her breakfast, then rubbed her hands together vigorously. The two had not rejoined the other survivors. Balak thought that being in a large crowd made it easier for the assassin to locate them. They wanted a quiet place to think, so Balak found them somewhere well hidden, secluded, and peaceful. They set off reasonably early and walked through the forest in silence until they reached a small mountain range. They climbed the lowest one. Balak had never seen a range of mountains so green before. Their white, icy peaks added to their beauty. It was freezing, and the higher they got, the colder it felt. When they had climbed around 2/3 of the way up, the path led them over the mountains. They could see for kilometers, and Arda was pleased she didn't have to carry on to the peak. "That's the Hand of the Fallen, isn't it?" Arda gasped. It was the first time she'd spoken since breakfast.
"Yeah."
Balak crouched down and unrolled the map, positioning it so that it lined up with the Hand of the Fallen. He studied it to get his bearings once more. "It's bigger than I imagined. Makes you feel how small we are," Arda continued. Balak pushed himself to his feet and shielded his eyes with his palm as he scanned the area.
"Makes you believe in the stories of old."
Arda offered a half-smile. A strange sound caught their attention. A huge shadow sailed across the ground seamlessly, and for only a moment the place where they stood turned black. The shape swooped in circles and caused a light breeze as its wings powered up and down. Balak and Arda stood in awe, staring at the beautiful mountain dragon. It opened its wings proudly and glided above their heads, swirling around just once more before flying in another direction. "Is that a—" Arda asked Balak.
"Dragon,"
Balak finished.
"There are said to only be a handful of dragons left. I think that one is called Kaya. I've read about her in my books,"
Arda admitted.
"It must have stayed hidden here all these years, away from all the unwanted attention, waiting to outlive us all,"
Balak concluded. There was a brief silence. Balak and Arda looked again at Kaya before tilting their heads toward the ground. The creature was bold. It was close to extinction, yet it appeared to them. It did not shy away and hide. Giants had suffered a similar fate. The conflicts of men stemmed from the arguments of one power-crazed family warring for overall dominance. Before heading back, they watched as the dragon disappeared through the clouds. Arda slowed her pace and stood still. Balak looked back, curious, and watched.
"He won't stop, will he? The assassin, that is?"
Arda questioned.
"No. I've seen the look on his face. That is the face of a man unwilling to stop,"
Balak stated.
"We are not going to Shirak. We are heading west."
"What about the child's destiny?"
"She might have royal blood in her, but she is my child too, and until she is old enough, that's up to me to decide."
Balak nodded. Arda left the hollow as a girl. and was starting to grow into a wise woman.
"What's west?"
Balak asked.
Away from all of this, we are heading to Zagros. Are you with me?
"Wherever you go, I follow."
We'll be there in a week's time.
"Lead us then."
As they continued over the mountains, the sky turned a bright white. A chilly wind blew gently and hit at their cheeks and fingers. The path led them up a final incline, and the wind started to pick up speed. Gentle flakes of snow fluttered down from the sky, but they soon turned into a thick snow that beat at their faces and bodies. Balak and Arda shivered. They could not get warm. Their pace slowed as they waded through the snow, and the child began to shiver and whimper. At one point, Arda was almost up to her knees. She used her staff to push through. The two soldiered on, and as they headed down from the mountains, they were shielded from the snow, and the temperature rose a little, but very slowly. At the final lookout post before they left the mountains, Balak pointed out the crimson point to Arda. They were almost there. They were talking as they approached the foot of the mountain.
"The crimson point is not far away. We should keep going,"
Balak said, but Arda stopped suddenly in her tracks. She looked behind them and noticed a murky figure approaching them fast. Balak growled,
"Not this guy again. We need to move, fast."
The forceful winds were slowing them down, and the figure was gaining on them. Then Balak turned around and stood still. Arda called out for him.
Balak, what are you doing?
"Keep going. I'll slow him down."
Arda started walking closer to Balak.
He will kill you, she said.
"Arda, stop! What are you doing?"
You can't stop him, at least not on your own. If we fight together, we have a better chance of defeating him.
Balak's face expressed grave concern, but upon thinking further about it, he nodded.
"Don't hold back," he said.
I won't.
Arda quickly unstrapped the sleeping child, left her in her basket, and placed her by a tree. They stood and waited for the assassin to approach. He looked tired, but continued trudging through the snow. Once he was close enough, Arda readied herself with her spear, and Balak yanked his double-headed axe from his belt. They marched toward the assassin. Balak swung first, but the assassin was fast and anticipated his strike. He ducked and rolled toward Balak, elbowing him in the face. He struck Balak's wrist, disarming him. Balak threw his fist, and it crashed into the assassin's face. He dropped his sword, and the blow sent him flying backward. He landed next to Arda. He slapped her face hard, knocking her to the ground. "Stay down, girl," he warned. Arda spun her spear and swiped at his legs. The assassin fell to the ground, but sprung back to his feet. She rolled away from him and got back up. He walked toward her, and she thrust her spear seamlessly, but the assassin ducked and dodged every strike. He raised his leg to kick her away, but she spun and lunged onward, scraping his cheek. As she did, he thrust his fist forward and knocked her to the ground once more. A speck of blood ran down his cheek. The assassin wiped his face and looked at his hand. "All of this for a flesh wound," he scowled. His attention turned back to Balak. The assassin charged toward Balak before he had a chance to pick up his axe. He threw himself at Balak's middle and took him down by the waist. Arda's eyes widened as she watched the assassin pummel Balak's face and ribs. He pushed Balak over and pounded him. He jumped to his feet and headed for his sword, which lay on the ground. He walked again toward Balak and raised his sword above him, waiting to strike. Balak barely moved. "Not as tall when you're on your knees," the assassin blurted out. Arda clambered to her feet and banged her stick on the ground. As soon as the assassin heard it, He spun around and moved out of the way of her fire blast. He smiled. "Not this time."
"I wasn't aiming at you,"
she assured him. A noise rumbled behind the assassin as a wave of snow dropped from the mountaintops and flooded in their direction. It towered in height as it rolled toward them, and snow covered everything. It was quiet as the snow settled. Everyone had disappeared beneath the white, thick frosting. There were no signs of life.